So, Colonel, worst case, worst case scenario here. Okay, best case, obviously we know what the best case is. Okay, they figured out it's done. You know, there's a way to coexist and everything goes smoothly. How bad is the worst case? This question's been asked. Many people have gone to different places. Give different elements of worst case.
Here's the thing that concerns me most of all, that could lead to the quote-unquote worst case, which I regard as a nuclear exchange, all right? No one in Russia, Putin, no one in Beijing, neither government has an interest in launching a nuclear weapon. I mean, they understand that if you use a nuclear weapon, the rapidity with which war will escalate is mind-numbing. That's the great myth of the so-called tactical nuclear weapon that you hear from the U.S. Air Force and others and the Navy. Oh, well, we can shoot a nuke, a low yield, only 5 kilotons, only kill maybe 30 or 40,000 people. No one will notice. In other words, this is a useful battlefield weapon. Outrageous nonsense. It is not. If any nuclear weapon is used, everybody escalates. And the reason for that is simple. Everyone's afraid that if they don't use their arsenal, they'll lose it. So we don't want to get there. How do we get there if we're stupid? If we're stupid and we try to engage the Russians conventionally, we'll lose. If there's one thing the Russians can handle, it's conventional warfare. You've already seen that in Ukraine. They can defeat us conventionally. We don't have enough forces to send. We don't have enough troops on active duty. If we try to suddenly mobilize and send someone across the Atlantic, we're going to encounter a huge Russian submarine fleet, which will sink everything that tries to cross the Atlantic. We will have no support out of anyone in Northeast Asia. The Koreans, the Japanese, nobody wants to be part of this war. So if you think you're going to have a backdoor into Russia across the Pacific, you've lost your mind. So if we engage them in conventional terms, we will lose. And we don't want to do that. In other words, let's not push that envelope. But that means that you have to recognize two things. First of all, in Europe, these borders have changed dozens of times over 1,000 years. Everybody looks at this border that constitutes the current Ukrainian construct and says, oh, well, that can never change. It's absurd. It never made any sense when Lenin created it because the Ukrainians live primarily west of the Dnieper and a little bit to the east to the very northern edge of White Russia. That's it. And this thing called Ukraina, which means on the edge or the margin or something, had been ruled by the Duchy of Lithuania, then the Kingdom of Poland, then the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth for hundreds of years. And ownership passed back and forth with Russia because the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth fell apart largely on its own. My point is that we are imputing a degree of legitimacy to these borders that was never there. And that was Putin's speech that he gave months ago, long before the war, saying, look, these borders don't make any sense because you've got all these Russians in the east. Brzezinski, when he was alive, pointed to that and said, that's dangerous. We need to sit down and talk with the Russians and fix this problem because otherwise the presence of all of these Russians in eastern Ukraine is going to end up being a catalyst for war. Now, we thought we could get the Ukrainians to maintain a quote-unquote multinational, multicultural state where these people would be accepted and could live as co-equals.
This is the Minsk Accords that you said.
Yes,
later
yeah.
People said, no, we were lying.
Yeah. But the truth is, in Europe, how well have multinational, multilingual, multicultural states worked? Well, not so good. You know, the Soviet Union fell apart instantly. And what do you have now? Multiple nations. Yugoslavia fell apart very rapidly. You have multiple nations. Czechoslovakia fell apart instantly because Czechs and Slovaks didn't want to live together. This is the history of Europe. And historically, great powers have come to terms with each other and said, look, let's come up with this compromise. It may not be perfect. We may have to revisit this in 20 years, but let's get peace. In other words, let's establish peace first. Then we can come back and revisit it in the future as necessary to ensure everybody's interests are met. We won't do that. We have built ourselves up into this foolish notion that we're the indispensable superpower. We must dominate everything. Nothing on this planet can happen without us. Wrong. This planet went on for thousands of years before we showed up. You know, we can go anywhere you want with the Armenians, with the Turks. Talk about Azerbaijan. I was talking to somebody and I said, you realize these are Azeri Turks. And this was a member of Congress said, what's that? I mean, Americans don't know anything that happens beyond their borders, frankly. We don't study it. And the people that are governing us aren't paying attention to it. Right now, you try to explain Ukraine, and they don't understand what that is, what it really means. It's history. If they understood any of it, we wouldn't be involved in it. We're not competent to sort this out. The Europeans need to sort it out.
Why, though? Unpack that. So if we did know the history, we wouldn't be involved in it. Why wouldn't we be involved in it?
Because there's been so much hatred and bloodshed in that part of the world over the last 100 years that it's virtually impossible for us to go in and reconcile all of these parties. In other words, to some extent, it has to be fought out. And I think that's already largely happened. And if we were smart, we would sit down and recognize that this has happened and say enough is enough. How much more blood has to be spilled? I don't think we need to spill any more blood in that region. And we need to redraw the borders. We need to make Western Ukraine, whatever remains of it, neutral.
You remember the whole 2 days before 9/11, Rumsfeld comes out saying $2.3 trillion of money's been missing. And, you know, that whole story of what happened and then 9/11 took place. And, hey, you know, weapons of mass destruction, we have to do all of that. That led to there was no weapons of mass destruction. And that one video where President Bush says, well, you know, with what's going on right now and they're, you know, trying to take over Iraq, he says, oops, you know, similar thing. I don't know if you've seen when he's giving that speech. So a lot of people are sitting there saying, okay, so who wants this thing to continue? Eisenhower prepped everybody right after he was done saying, be careful with the whole military-industrial complex. JFK was kind of pushing the envelope saying, hey, we got to also go through this. Trump was also saying there's no need to go into half these wars. Why do we have 780 military bases? But who wants this thing to continue, and who benefits the most if this thing continues?
Well, remember that the bases that you're referring to are really a product of the Cold War. And the fact that after the Second World War ended, we were literally the only man standing. Europe was in ruins. The Soviet Union was by no means strong enough to wage a new war. They'd lost, we think now they've lost during the war 39 million. So we were the only power. Japan was prostrate. We had to stay in Japan because if we had left Japan, it could have become a Soviet satellite. In other words, most of the things that we did after 1945 have to do with communism, containing it, suppressing it. And remember, the idea was that you don't confront directly militarily. You contain it until it finally implodes. Guess what? It worked. They imploded. We like to say, well, we caused it, but the truth is the system itself was so dysfunctional, it was going to implode on its own.
Totally
anyway.
get it, yeah.
So then this ends, and then you have a lot of people in Washington say, well, we hold all the cards. We're the only superpower. In other words, we're the British Empire after Waterloo. You know, we can intervene everywhere. We can reshape the world in our own image. You have this man, Wolfowitz, who wrote a document in the Pentagon that essentially says, we're going to become altruistic imperialists. We're going to go over there, right the wrongs, make the world safe for us, make it safe for our allies, make it safe for Israel, whatever, you know, go down the list. This was Wolfowitz. Everybody adopted this and said, this is great because there's no one who can challenge us. Remember Desert Storm? Desert Storm sent this message. Look, we've got things nobody else has. Nobody can take us on. Well, the truth is that everything that we had in Desert Storm as a monopoly has been lost. And all the technologies and capabilities that we had then that no one else did are now everywhere. Everybody's got them. And you can see that happening right now in Ukraine. So the world has changed, but we did not. We decided, well, you know, we're going to run this place, and we're going to structure the financial system, the global financial system, to suit us. We're going to use it to force people to do the things we want them to do. And we're doing it all in the name of this crusading liberal democratic approach. In other words, we're crusaders for liberal democracy. Well, that doesn't hold up to close scrutiny. I mean, let's face it, that's a lot of nonsense. Behind the scenes, you have all of these people invested in personally and in terms of their wealth invested in this global structure. We call it security, and the rest of the world looks at it as potentially dangerous American military presence. I don't know that Americans realize that this hangover from the Cold War is primarily responsible for it. But if you have lots of money going into weapon systems, into programs, into policies, into foreign aid that have been going there and going there and going there and going there, you have lots of people on the Hill, and you have lots of donors who control the Hill that profit from that. They don't want that to stop. And that was Trump's great sin, if you will, in Washington. He's disrupting the money flow. If Trump gets away with this, we're going to go broke. We'll lose money. That was the reason Trump was hated, despised, and successfully subverted, I would add. But we still have to do it. We still have to stop it. And we're up against a group of people in Washington who want to keep it going.
Happy 4th of July to you. We have a special event that's coming up with Tom Brady, Mike Tyson, and Will Guidara in Miami, Vol Conference. It'll be August 30th to September 2nd. This weekend for 4th of July, we're running a special. Buy one, get one free. Bring your spouse, bring your business partner, bring your running mate. If you haven't yet registered, click on a link below or above. Get registered. Looking forward to spending 3 days with you in Miami.